I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you what matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. The African National Congress and its Left Alliance partners, the South African Communist Party and COSATU, are debating economic policy questions amid the devastation of COVID-19 on the global and domestic economy. The discussions are part of ongoing engagements, given the downward trajectory of the South African economy that was already in deep trouble before the pandemic, with record unemployment, inequality and, of course, poverty. The ANC's Economic Transformation Committee has released a document charting the party's thinking. Joining me now to unpack this and to talk about the discussions is Enoch Godongwana, the ANC's National Executive Committee and head of the ETC. Good morning, Mr. Godongwana. A lot of discussions, of course, on economic policy. You have released a document, so has the alliance partners. And in the statement that the alliance partners released, they talk about 7 pillars of the economy. The one speaks about economic reconstruction, with industry master plans for domestic investment and macroeconomic policy alignment. Is this signaling new policy changes that the party is thinking about, given the unprecedented nature of this pandemic on the economy?
First, Karima, let me correct. We did not release a document. A PowerPoint presentation dated the 22nd of May was leaked. So there's a difference between the two. The second thing, we are not thinking about new policy. The mandate we have from the National Executive Committee is to develop a reconstruction, post-coronavirus reconstruction plan.
Now, what would such a plan look like, given the fact that we have already seen the stimulus package, which was quite unprecedented? It has had impacts on what kind of budgetary constraints we face and a rerouting of resources. If you're talking about this reconstruction plan, take us through what the key elements would be.
What the reconstruction plan will do will build on the existing interventions the state have made. The first part of that focus of the state was to save lives. The second part of that was to mitigate the effects of the virus on incomes and lives of our people. The third element is to go beyond that and say, how are we going to reconstruct the economy after the virus?
Now, one of the things, Mr. Godongwana, sorry to come in here, in the statement that the Alliance Secretariat released in the week, they speak about bringing back and investigating the feasibility of a minimum income support grant. Can you give clarity on what exactly that means? Just recently, when the President spoke, he spoke about the temporary nature of the special COVID-19 grant. What grant is this that the Alliance Secretariat is referring to? Presumably it comes from the conversations that you were having both in the ETC and in the Alliance Secretariat and Political Council.
It's going to be important to note the language used. The language used is to investigate the feasibility of that grant. What kind of grant are we talking about? You will recall that in the about 2000 or some time ago, there was an investigation by Vivian Taylor which came to a proposition that we should look at basic income grant. There are people who are proposing that the new normal is going to require that there should be permanent income support for those who can't find employment. And the proposal is how to investigate.
Now, when you say the proposal is let's investigate, presumably when Professor Taylor had done that study, things like costings has done, obviously the world has changed dramatically. Are you saying, as the African National Congress and together with your alliance partners, that you want Treasury, for example, to cost what such a basic income grant should look like, and more importantly, where the money is likely to be raised from?
Precisely, is to look at whether we can afford as an economy to do that. If so, what are going to be the conditions? And thirdly, what is going to be the selection criteria?
Now, at the moment, Mr. Godongwana, we have the COVID-19 grant. It is 350 Rand. It's unprecedented, but we've had quite a lot of problems with accessing people on a system that's reliable. The last time we spoke, very few people had managed to access that grant. What was the discussion in the ETC just about the infrastructure and the architecture that one would require to make such a grant, viable in the event that it is decided that it is affordable and it is politically prudent to do so?
Well, for now, the ETC is not focusing on the grant. For now, the ETC is focusing on reconstructing the economy. The question we're posing is, what are the fault lines has the coronavirus revealed? Among other things, there's unanimity in all of us in South Africa that social distancing in township and those areas is not happening. And the reason for that is the amount, is that they are all sitting in a number of people in one house, which means there's little investment in basic needs in the township, such as transport, housing, water, and electricity. And for us, the starting point is how do we focus on investment in those underdeveloped areas.
But you do talk in your document, Mr. Godongwana, about capacitating the state. And if you look at, for example, all the economic interventions that the state has made, or that the ANC has made, it's used the state to do so. But you've often been beaten back because you have a patchy state. The health of state institutions isn't always in the best place to actually make these things happen. So obviously, whilst you're not discussing the grant, when you look at capacitating the state, how do you look at capacitating the state to help those who are most vulnerable? Surely it has to look at how those who would need such a grant would be able to be accessed by the government.
I can say you're pushing me towards discussing the grant. Let me just say, even if we were to go towards the grant, one of the key elements of that is to ensure that we've got sufficient data which is reliable, which can tell you who is unemployed. At the moment, is purely numbers that tell you that about 10 million people who are unemployed. They are not human beings. We don't know who are they, where do they live, how old are they, what is their qualification. That sort of data is going to be critical in order to target the unemployed.
Now, one of the things that you do look at in terms of reconstructing the economy is, of course, this question of social compacting. The document spends quite a lot of time on this. We've seen institutions such as NEDLAC come under a lot of strain when it was discussing the minimum wage. Often people go to these forums, they think they've agreed. When it comes to implementation, the agreements fall flat. How do you envisage the nature of the social compact? Should it only be at national level, or are you talking about building it at provincial and municipal and sectoral levels as well?
I mean, we draw a distinction between the social compacting, which is happening at NEDLAC, and the one envisaged in the document. If you look at the amount of cooperation that has taken place now in dealing with the pandemic, you can see that in itself reflects certain elements of social compacting, where various social partners, civil society, the state, business and labor are working together to achieve the same objective. I think there will be different forms of social compacting, both national, provincial, local, and sectoral. For instance, we are arguing in our document that there should be sectoral plans And those sectoral plans are not only going to develop a bureaucracy in Tshwane. The sectors themselves have got to be active in the formulation of the sector plans.
Now, let's take a sector that has been under scrutiny for a long time and particularly badly hit by COVID-19, which is the aviation industry. And, of course, our big way into that as the South African government is, of course, via SAA, and it's been the topic of discussion. In the Alliance statement, the Alliance talks about SAA, but in your document, where you speak about state institutions and SOEs, you are quiet about institutions such as SAA. I've had a look at the draft plan for SAA. What is the African National Congress position on SAA? Because there seems to be disagreement among individuals in the organization on whether we stay with SAA or whether it is, something that we should give up on.
That's the weakness of a leaked document, in that it doesn't sometimes is leaked before a proper context is put into place. For instance, the National Executive mandated us to not only to look at SAA, to look at the aviation industry. In the new document that we will be releasing, there will be a section on the aviation industry. That's the first point I want to clarify. In relation to SAA, we're not putting any new policy statements. The National Executive in February crafted an approach which we should be following in relation to SAA. And that approach is that we should be thinking about working not only alone as government, but also to look at who else can work with us and partners and partner with us in reviving SAA. What we are keen on is not the form of ownership of the SAA, but whether we can have a new company still called SAA because it's a good brand, and people still carrying our flag. It's a good flag, and therefore partner with strategic partners to achieve that. That position of the National Executive still remains.
But what exactly does that mean? Does it mean, for example, that government gives up its stake in SAA wholly, that it's another word for privatization? Just break down for us what exactly a new SAA would look like and what the ANC view is on the matter.
In terms of our resolution, unless our comrades to play in government come up with a new proposal, in terms of the resolution, a new SAA would be a partnership between government and the private sector.
But what exactly does that mean, Mr. Godongwana? What kind of percentage would the government have? And if it's not a majority share, can you still call it a state-owned company?
The ANC has not prescribed the percentages. It has prescribed the principle of partnership with the private sector.
So if we're talking about what the President said recently, that he's very gung-ho about SAA and that he believes it can work, many people think that that is throwing good money after bad. Why is the President of the African National Congress and the country gung-ho about a new SAA, given the fact that it's actually just been a black hole where money has disappeared into?
Look, we must distinguish between the mismanagement of SAA and the necessity of a national airline, which is critical for a variety of reasons. What people underestimate about the aviation industry is, particularly that's locally owned, is some of the macroeconomic implications of not having one. Is one of them the balance of payment problem, because money goes to the countries that have got airlines. Ticket bookings are done overseas and everything else. That has got implications on the balance of payment. So I'm just highlighting one other than employment creation, which is obvious. So having a national airline is itself an important aspect. You don't throw the baby with the bathwater because there's been mismanagement and then say you can't have a state an airline.
All right, let's just focus quickly on the role of the Reserve Bank. There's been a lot of toing and froing on exactly what role the Reserve Bank ought to play in this crisis. Take us through what the thinking is in the African National Congress, and also that alliance conversation around the extent to which the Reserve Bank should play an interventionist role.
Let me just state the obvious first, and that is that we respect the independence of the Reserve Bank as prescribed in the Constitution. That's the first point. Whatever proposition and proposal we're putting forward are not a prescription, but a formulation which says is critical for macroeconomic coordination. What that means is that there should be proper fiscal and monetary policy coordination. And the Constitution says that the Minister of Finance's responsibility is to achieve that. Having said that, therefore, we believe that if that happens, and we believe that we need what people have called a developmental South African Reserve Bank.
What does a developmental South African Reserve Bank mean, Minister? Mr. Godongwana, sorry.
What does that say? A number of central banks look at different permutations when they use their tools of and instruments of monetary policy. Is employment effect, is growth in the economy. Mind you, the Constitution says the Reserve Bank must maintain price stability, not for its own sake, but in the interest of balanced growth. And it's that missing link when people debate the role of the Reserve Bank is its primary focus is balanced growth. Even maintaining price stability is intended to achieve a balanced growth. So it's going to be quite important. A balanced growth is a balanced growth that ensures there's proper employment, there's growth in the economy, and all of those things.
Just a quick question. When is the final document going to be released to the public for scrutiny?
We want to be ahead of the curve because government is also involved in a process of looking into this, into the post-coronavirus reconstruction. Everybody, including business, have developed document. So we can't be, we've got to produce a document as quickly as possible so that we should be able to interface with that discourse.
So you can't give a date, Mr. Godongwana?
Not at this stage, but sooner in the next two weeks or so.
All right, that's where we'll leave it. The ANC's head of its ETC committee talking, of course, there about a reconstruction plan that the governing party is thinking about. Let's take a short break. Up next, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga on whether we are ready to open schools tomorrow. Don't go anywhere.